September 1931, Harpswell Sound, Maine. The lighthouse at Carrow Point had operated without interruption for 61 years. The keeper's log was maintained in a standard-issue bound ledger, entries made daily in the keeper's own hand. Edmund Farris had kept that log without a single missed entry for 9 years. His last official entry, as recorded by the United States Lighthouse Service, was dated October 3, 1931. Edmund Farris was found dead in the lamp room of Carrow Point Lighthouse on the morning of October 4th. The coroner placed time of death at no less than 18 hours prior to discovery, meaning Edmund Farris died sometime in the late hours of October 2nd or the very early hours of October 3rd. The entry, dated October 3rd, is 214 words long. It describes vessel traffic, a pressure drop in the barometer, and a note about a sound coming from the rocks below the tower that Edmund had been hearing for several nights running. It is written in Edmund Farris's hand. He had been dead for at least 6 hours when he wrote it. That was the first entry after his death. There were 43 more. If you found your way here through the quieter edges of recorded history, stay with me. The records I bring to this channel are the ones that didn't make it into the textbooks, filed in the wrong drawer, buried under language designed to make them easy to overlook. Some were lost by accident. Some were put somewhere dark on purpose. This is one of the second kind.
Edmund Farris was 58 years old in the autumn of 1931. He had been keeper at Carrow Point since September of 1922. A Maine native, merchant marine trained, he took the posting at 49 with the deliberate intention of spending his remaining working years in a position that offered solitude, purpose, and proximity to the water he had worked all his life. He was not a fanciful man. 9 years of log entries confirmed this without ambiguity. Weather, vessels, equipment, the occasional note about wildlife on the rocks. His prose was functional, spare, entirely free of elaboration. He recorded what he saw and what he did, and nothing more. This is why the log becomes, in its final 44 entries, is so difficult to set aside. Carrow Point Lighthouse stood on a granite promontory at the south tip of Harpswell Neck, approximately 4 miles from the nearest inhabited structure. The tower was 67 feet tall. The surrounding rocks were Atlantic granite, old and sharp, dropping to tidal flats on the eastern exposure and open water on the west and south. In autumn, the sound of the ocean against those rocks carried to every room in the dwelling and the tower. Edmund had noted this in his first October at the posting. "A sound," he wrote, "you either learn to hear as company, or you do not last the winter." He lasted 9 of them. The first reference to the sound appears in the entry for September 22, 1931, 11 days before his recorded death. Edmund notes clearing weather, 2 vessel sightings, and then adds at the end, "a sound from the eastern rocks this evening that I cannot place. Not surf, not the normal movement of the seals that winter on the lower shelf. Something with interval to it, rhythmic, below what I would call the register of animal noise, noted for continuity. Even in anomaly, a professional." September 23rd, still present before dawn, longer interval now, approximately every 9 minutes. The seals have moved off the lower shelf entirely, which I have not seen this early in the season. I checked the lamp at 300 and heard it clearly from the gallery. It is directional, coming from a specific point on the eastern rocks, a formation we call locally the split, where the granite has fractured along a seam and created a narrow channel that fills and empties with the tide. I assumed initially that the sound was produced by tidal mechanics within the channel. I am less certain of this than I was this morning.
By September 27th, the entries have changed in a way that is subtle enough to miss on a first reading and impossible to unsee on a second. The practical observations remain, but they are preceded now by a section, growing longer each day, that Edmund heads simply "the sound." September 27th. The interval has shortened to approximately every 4 minutes. I have begun timing it with my watch as I would time a fog signal because it has that quality of deliberate regularity, the quality of something that is not random. I find I am listening for it when it stops. That is a different kind of attention than listening for it when it starts. I want the record to reflect that I understand the distinction. September 29th. Edmund descended to the eastern rocks himself. He took the storm lantern and a length of rope. He reached the split at approximately 2300 and stood at its edge for 30 minutes. He heard nothing. The moment he began his ascent back to the tower, the sound resumed behind him. It continued until 0230. He logged this without commentary. He did not need to add any. September 30th. The sound is inside the tower now, not in it, against it. I can hear it in the walls of the covered passage when I make the lamp check, a conduction through the rock itself. I checked the passage walls with my hand at 0200 and could feel a faint vibration in the stone at the documented intervals. I am a practical man. What I will say is that there is something in the water at the split or below the water that has been producing a deliberate and consistent sound for 8 days. That this sound has changed in interval and character since I first noted it from September 22nd, and that the seals that have wintered on this shelf for the 9 years of my posting have not returned since September 22nd. I am noting all of this because I want the record to be complete, regardless of what conclusions are eventually drawn from it. October 1st. 2 entries. Not Edmund's habit. The first, at standard morning time, records nothing unusual. The second, written at 23:47, is the following in its entirety. I saw something at the split this evening at approximately 2200. I was on the gallery with the glass, checking the outer ledges for vessel proximity. I turned the glass to the eastern rocks as a matter of habit, and I saw it, at the edge of the split, in the water, or partly in the water. I will not describe it in detail in this entry because I am not yet certain enough of what I observed to put it in terms that will survive my own review in the morning. What I will note is this: it was large, it was aware of the light, and when the beam swept past it on the rotation, it did not move away. It turned toward the light. I have been a keeper for 9 years. I have seen everything the water brings to these rocks. I am recording this because I want there to be a record that does not depend on my interpretation. The facts are sufficient. The stone is warm. The light turns. It watches. That is enough. It was. October 2nd is the last entry written by a living Edmund Farris. It is the longest entry in 9 years of logs, 6 full pages. Edmund, who for 9 years had written in sentences containing no word he did not need, fills those pages with a description that is methodical in structure and profoundly wrong in content. He describes the thing at the split as having dimensions he cannot reconcile with any known marine animal. He describes its movement in and on the water as inconsistent with anything in 30 years at sea. He describes the sound, now continuous, as having crossed a threshold in the past 24 hours, from a sound produced outside his body to a sound he can feel inside it. He ends the entry with this: "I do not know whether what I am recording constitutes a sighting in any official sense. I know it is real. I know that I have been watching it for 3 hours and that it has not looked away from the light since the rotation began tonight. I know that the stone of this tower is warm in a way it has never been warm in 9 autumns of my keeping it. Whatever framework I have for understanding what lives in this water does not contain what is outside this tower tonight. I am noting this because I want there to be a record that does not depend on my interpretation. The facts are sufficient. The stone is warm. The light turns. It watches. That is enough."
That is the last entry Edmund Farris wrote while alive. The supply tender arrived at first light on October 4th. The lamp was burning. The log was open on the desk in the keeper's dwelling. Edmund was found in the lamp room at the top of the tower, seated against the wall below the lens housing, with his hands in his lap and his eyes open. The coroner noted that his expression was one he found, and this is the coroner's word, not mine, attentive, as though he had been watching something at the moment his heart stopped. The log did not stop. The next entry is dated October 3rd, 1931, written in Edmund Farris's hand, not the hand of a man who was hurrying or deteriorating, the same hand as every entry before it. Barometric pressure noted with the same precision, 2 vessel sightings, north-northeast, lamp checked and functional. And then, at the end, the sound from the rocks has changed again tonight. I believe it has moved inside, not into the tower, into the rock below the tower. There is a difference. I want the record to reflect that I understand the difference. He had been dead for at least 6 hours. I had the handwriting analyzed by 2 independent document examiners in 1989 and again in 1991. Both confirmed with the careful hedging of professionals who understood the implications of what they were saying, that the writing was consistent with authenticated samples from the prior 9 years. No forgery, no imitative reproduction. There was no mechanical explanation available to either examiner. There was no non-mechanical one either. What follows across 43 further entries, dated October 4th through November 16th, is internally coherent in a way I keep returning to. If someone had fabricated these entries, the expected result would be escalating drama, revelation, the structure of a story building toward a payoff. That is not what they are. They are, like every entry Edmund ever wrote, observational. October 19th. Whatever is in the water has been at the tower base for 6 consecutive tidal cycles. It does not retreat with the tide. The tide retreats around it. October 28th. The lamp has been maintained through every rotation. I want this to be clear. Whatever is happening at the base of this tower, the light is kept. November 3rd. There is a smell below the lamp room I cannot attribute to any mechanical source. Organic, old in a way I do not have precise language for. Whatever is at the base of this tower is old. I do not know how I know this with the certainty that I feel it, but I want it in the record regardless. November 9th. It came above the waterline last night. I could hear the weight of it on the rocks below the tower. Not the sound, the weight, the compression of granite beneath something substantial moving across it. I did not go to the gallery. I kept the lamp. I did not go to the gallery. November 14th.
I understand now what it was waiting for. I cannot write what I understand in terms the record will survive intact. What I will say is that it is patient in the way very old things are patient, and that the light is not incidental to it. The light is the point. I do not know what that means for the vessels that depend on it. I do not know what it means for the next keeper. I am putting this here so that if someone reads this record who understands what I am describing, they will know that I saw it clearly. The stone remembers. The water does not forget. The light turns. That is all I can give you. November 16th, 1931. The last entry in the Carrow Point log. 4 words written in Edmund Farris's hand, 6 weeks after his death. On a page the document examiners confirmed was written in a single sitting, with no evidence of tremor, duress, or deterioration. It is still here. The new keeper, a man named Peter Allard, arrived at Carrow Point on November 22nd, 1931. He was 44 years old, transferred from the New Hampshire coast. His letter of resignation was filed 19 days later, December 11th, 1931. It gives no reason beyond personal circumstances. He never spoke publicly about his 19 days at Carrow Point, not once. His family, when contacted by a researcher in the 1970s, said only that he had returned from that posting a different man, and had not lived near the water again for the remaining 30 years of his life. The district superintendent who handled Edmund Farris's death and the subsequent log review retired from the Lighthouse service in the spring of 1932. He moved inland to western Massachusetts. A colleague who maintained correspondence with him through the late 1930s noted in his own diary that the superintendent had, on one occasion and without apparent context, stated that there are things in the water along that coast that were old before the first ship crossed it, and that some of them have learned to use what we build.
He did not elaborate. The colleague did not press. Carrow Point Lighthouse was decommissioned in 1961 and the structure transferred to state jurisdiction. The keeper's log, all 9 years of Edmund Farris's entries and the 44 that followed his death, is held in a Coast Guard archive in Boston. The official finding on the post-mortem entries remains, to this day, administrative dating error due to keeper fatigue. The file I found in 1987, the one mislabeled and placed in the wrong box, contained one item that was not in the official record: a photograph. Black and white, poorly exposed, apparently taken from the rocks below the tower looking up. The tower is visible. The lamp is burning. The date written on the back in faded pencil is November 14th, 1931, 2 weeks after Edmund Farris died. Something is visible at the base of that tower in that photograph. I have looked at it for a long time. I will not describe what I see in it for the same reason Edmund would not describe what he saw from the gallery on October 1st, because I am not certain enough of what I am observing to put in terms that will survive my own review in the morning. What I will tell you is that the lamp in that photograph is burning, and that whatever is at the base of that tower is facing it. The light turns.
It watches. Some things in the water along that coast were old before the first ship crossed it. Some of them, it appears, have patience enough to wait, and something enough to come eventually to the light.